Rachel Manila, Lori Summers,
Here.
Denise Winfrey,
Here.
Mark Ferry.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum. Please rise for the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we have minutes from May 9th. So motion. Second. Any additions or corrections? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Our first item of new business is a special use permit for auto sales. Jessica, do you want to give us an update?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Zoning case ZC-17-001 takes place in Wheatland Township. The applicant, Noman Beg, is requesting a special use permit to operate a used auto dealership at the location. He is in negotiations to purchase that property now. Planning and Zoning Commission had no issues, and they voted unanimously for approval. Thank you.
Okay, any comments or questions by committee?
No motion to second.
We have a motion and a second. Any objectors to this change? Okay, no objectors. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Second item is an extension of a special use permit. Brian, you want to give us an update?
Certainly, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The county board approved a special use permit in November of 2015 to allow, I guess I'd call it, they call it a party barn, but it's a gathering place for different types of events. That was special use 6262-S. Within 1 year, you're supposed to commence the special use or get a building permit to make it a valid special use permit. There's been some outstanding issues that we were dealing with, including fire suppression, architectural requirements, and landscaping. And the county board, a few months back, approved one extension of 6 months, and the ordinance allows up to 2 extensions. So now they're asking for the second extension, and the department issued a permit, I believe it was last week, to get the building permit work commencing on the site. So they should be in compliance here with all of our codes pretty soon. And we're just asking for that second the applicant is asking for that second extension of 6 months.
Okay. Any comments or questions by committee?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion. Second. Any objectors to this change? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Other business? Pre-authorization to foreclose Schoolhouse Industrial Park in New Lenox. Scott, you want to give us an update?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. There is a Schoolhouse Road Industrial Park which has a surety for the public improvements, and it expires on August 28th. Staff is requesting that you sign a pre-authorization for us to foreclose on that in the unlikely event that the developer does not provide a new surety before August 28th.
Thank you. Any questions by committee? We have a motion to approve. Motion.
Second.
Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Okay, zoning update. Colin?
All right.
Morning. For those who don't know me, I am Colin Dusing. I'm an application hire for Will County, and we have contracted with Duncan Associates to provide us an update for our zoning ordinance. Back in 2012, the county board did a comprehensive rezoning of the document, and now after 5 years later, we've kind of got the tabs of what worked, what didn't work, and just kind of tweaking what we previously were working on in 2012. And let's see. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Tom. Good morning, Chairman Weigel, committee members. My name is Kirk Bishop with Duncan Associates. I see a couple of familiar faces from my previous efforts working with the county to prepare a comprehensive update of the zoning ordinance, which was completed and adopted back in 2012. As Colin mentioned, 5 years down the road, we've identified a number of housekeeping, technical, and perhaps needed changes that we'd like to take another crack at, and so that's the origins of this project. A little presentation today, give you a status update, welcome your input, your guidance as we begin this process.
I'll take it.
You're going to guide this? Okay. As I mentioned, the types of changes we're contemplating this time around are, by and large, the vast majority are what I would describe as housekeeping or very technical in nature. They range from grammatical and punctuation errors to simply needed clarifications, rewording of things to clarify, both for staff charged with administering the ordinance and for property owners and developers and neighbors and residents, what the true intent of those provisions of the zoning ordinance really are. There are a small handful of things that I guess I would describe as rising to the level of policy or substantive in nature, and I'm going to give you a sampling of those today just to kind of tee up for you or give you a sense of those issues. As I say, I welcome your input as we go through those to say, oh, on that point, I have some thoughts. So, or anything that you want to make sure is on our list. I'm calling it at least, our punch list. And within 2 or 3 weeks or so, our schedule, you go to the next slide, Colin, has us delivering to the committee a kind of punch list report, which would be a comprehensive listing of all the changes that we're proposing to tackle. We won't have the ordinances done or the amendments done at that point, but at least give you a clear sense of all the things on our punch list. The project is if you could go back just a second, a simple kind of 3-phase project. There is some grant money involved, so we're on a fairly tight timeline, and which is appropriate given the fact that you're not going to throw out that massive effort that we undertook back in 2012, but we're really just going in and strategically addressing a few of the items. We're now nearing completion of phase 1, which is really the issue identification and direction stage, which will culminate in that punch list report that we'll be coming back to present to you all and be making available to others who participated in the effort today. We'll then enter the phase of the project where we go in and draft the amendments and do so in a way that clearly identifies for you and others who are looking at the document what we're proposing to change. And then the third and final phase, of course, since we're talking about a zoning ordinance amendment, would be the hearing phase, hearing and adoption phase, which we hope to be entering in late fall of this year and completing the project well before the end of the calendar year. Next slide, please. To date, I've been spending a lot of time working with staff to identify the items on our punch list. They did a tremendous amount of work even before our arrival on the scene and our engagement in this contract to identify things. They've been collecting these things as issues come up over the months and years since the 2012 effort. Beyond the staff and county level, we've engaged a number of stakeholders who have a strong interest in staying abreast of land use, development, kind of related concerns. And these are a number of groups I know you're familiar with. Farm Bureau, the Three Rivers Association of Realtors, utilities, housing advocates, Habitat for Humanity, the legal community who's often sort of representing property owners and developers before you. This afternoon, the staff will be engaging in a series of meetings with township officials, and we're continuing to kind of get the word out and offer opportunities for folks to weigh in early on. I guess the good news coming out of the stakeholder outreach effort that we've identified to date is that there's a general sense that the ordinance adopted in 2012 was a significant positive and has resulted in a number of very positive aspects for most of the stakeholders on this list, and they haven't been really able to identify significant needed changes at this point, that at least those that weren't already on our list. So we do have some work to do to clean up the ordinance and make these changes, but we're getting generally good reviews from these external stakeholders that we've reached out to today. So the punch list takes the form of a kind of table that identifies the section number of the ordinance, what the issue is, and then our proposed response. And as I say, as we get that ready for prime time, we'll be delivering it to you and come back and describe it in greater detail so that you'll have, I would say there's several dozen issues on that list at the moment. And as I mentioned before, by and large, they're Scribner's errors and very technical in nature. But there are a few that I want to go through today, and I'm finally at that stage of the presentation. So, an example of an issue that I think rises to the level of a policy issue or a substantive issue that you may well have some thoughts on would be the subject of entertainment and spectator sports. And I put on the slide here the definition from the ordinance and a proposed minor change of just examples of those uses ranging from horse shows and fairgrounds and racetracks. These are outdoor, large venue facilities. They may be dormant for a long period of time, but on certain weekends or on certain nights, there may be a lot of activities at these outdoor entertainment type venues. The ordinance today says that these uses, these types of uses, which can have some impacts on neighbors, need to be at least a mile away. And this was something that was discussed quite a bit back in 2012 as we were nearing adoption of the ordinance. And there was some changes made during the adoption stage, one of which said that these types of facilities and uses had to be separated by a mile from any R-zone, residentially zoned lots.
Where'd you come up with a mile? Because I think that may be excessive for 100 people.
Well, that's in fact what we want to talk to you about. We're of the same opinion. The mile limitation, I'm going back in time, but that was really generated by a board member at the time. And I think there was some back and forth. Some thought maybe more, some thought less, and we landed on
I was thinking
one.
more like 500 people and a half mile. That's my
Okay,
opinion.
perfect. Well, I want
That's just without even going into it heavily, without
Sure.
asking other people.
So the issue that brought this, the way this issue is to be is presented for you all is, we think that the mile limitation may be problematic because it requires notice to such a large area. It can be a massive expense. The only way you can get out from underneath that restriction is to go to every residential property owner within that 1 mile radius and have them sign an affidavit saying they waive their right to have that separation distance, and then they have to record that against their property.
Like that's why I
Which is a
suggest
big ordeal.
half mile at most, and then 500 people, because we have venues where my townships are, that 100 people, that's way too low. 500 people would be like probably acceptable. What do you do like Vincent Farms? They have in a day, I have no clue. 10,000 people, 100,000 people, because they go back and forth. So we have another place called Mono Farm, they have stuff in October. Then they have the same numbers of people. Then you have other farmers that have big pieces of land, and they might do one event a year, but they're gonna get more than 100 people, or they're not gonna get 10,000 either. So, you know, I'm just saying, 500 people would be a big number to me, but I would probably go along with 500 people.
What-
And a half mile.
The half mile, okay, that was going to be my question, is you think a half mile? Any others have any thoughts about it? Because we're in agreement that, I think the staff recommendation to you all is, let's at least reduce the distance requirement, because a mile takes in so much land. But
Is this just for new facilities? What about existing ones?
Well, existing ones would be, if they were lawfully established, they would have legal non-conforming status. So they might run into a problem if they were to expand their facility, but they would be grandfathered, to use the colloquial term.
Even as new owners? They would be
Yes,
grandfathered in?
it
Okay.
runs with the land and not
Okay.
ownership.
Yeah, because we have, I think it's Wapping Racetrack, that was my concern, because there was residential areas that are not even a quarter mile
Yeah.
away.
No.
So, and there's going to be a lot.
Yeah. Nobody's going to be shut, again, if facilities that were lawfully established, nobody's going to be shut down by any, even if we went more restrictive, and it clearly doesn't seem like we're going in that direction, nobody's going to be shut down by this or be prevented from selling or otherwise changing ownership.
I would think that they should be outdoor events, not necessarily like a theater, indoor
Yes,
theater.
sir.
I don't think that would be.
Yeah, this restriction does only apply to the outdoor, larger facilities, and it sounds like we're heading towards defining larger as certainly more than 100.
How would this affect the church? It has a big open field that decides to have a rally one time and probably never ever again.
That would be in the nature of a temporary use, and the ordinance really makes special accommodations for those types of temporary,
They pay a special fee for
special
that.
event. I can't answer that question.
Because I don't think it's appropriate to charge them a special fee if they're going to do a one-time event.
Well, I'll make a note of that on our punch list.
That would be important.
I think a half mile would be appropriate. The other committee members?
Half mile seems fine.
Well, rest assured that when we come back to you with an amendment, we will reduce the restrictions. We'll continue to take stakeholder input, but that's great direction from you all.
And what about the number? How does the rest of the group feel about making the number 500 instead of 100? It's 100, especially out in Crete and like where Lori's at, and Judy Ogala's at. You know, they have places out there, 100 people would be like nothing. So, and we have the same type of situation in Lockport and Homer and the part of New Lenox that I have. 500 people in some areas are nothing. And so why restrict them?
So I have a question then. How do the outdoor rodeos fit into this?
They fit in, that's what these are. That's what those are. They would be covered by this.
They would be covered by it because, I mean, those rodeos out by us in our area can be, I mean, many people show up, you can't track how many people are there, they block the roads. It can be very detrimental, very
I got them
detrimental.
by us too.
So we need to make sure we look at that and decide what's really appropriate.
Yeah, that really was, going back to the comprehensive ordinance update, that really was the driver for better defining this use and imposing those residential protection kinds of standards. Again, the feeling is perhaps we went a little too far with the amendments, but the rodeos and the types of facilities mentioned on there were the drivers at the time, because those were popping up in the county that really didn't have regulations.
Now, couldn't you just make a part of this that the policy is for a rodeo? They have to get a special use permit and come to us and describe what they're going to do, how many people, the whole bit like that, rather than make a rule that's going to be enforced for every single person other than rodeos.
the special use is going to be, you're going to see it as a special use anyway. These are just supplemental use.
I don't know that it makes much difference whether it's 100 or 500. I think anything over 100 is a lot of people.
Well, I do a rally, and I'll get 3,000 people, minimum 500, and depends where they're at. 3,000 people looks like 20. You know, how big is the venue? If you have 100 people in this room, it looks like it's kind of full, but if you put 100 people in the committee room, you'd think it's jammed. So it depends on the area. So what I'm saying is, if you're worried about rodeos, rodeos are something different. They got to go through a different process. Well, somebody that has a big piece of land and wants to have people come on it, if it's going to be less than 500, that would be fine with me. It's a big piece of land.
What is everybody else think? 100 or 500?
You know, what I'm reading on there says 100 or more. There's
Right,
no
which is
set
fine with me.
maximum. It's, you know,
It's the min, it's the cap.
I
I
was-
would say that's fine with me.
I was
And I would
reading it
say
different, that it should be
finish.
500 or more.
but it's
I
a
would say
suggestion
100 or
of
more is
100
fine.
or more participants.
And the other thing I would say is that this, even though rodeos are a big piece of this, it would include any kind of an outdoor fair if someone decided to do something like that in a lot. So the guidelines for me would need to be the half mile and 100 or more. Because anytime you have that larger gathering, even though they may not look big on the land, if there are people within a close distance, the noise level would be what impacts neighbors. Noise, trash, parking, roadways, and all of that. So I would support half mile, 100 or more.
Okay, it looks like the consensus 100 or more would be sufficient, rather than making.
And we'll talk about it in caucus, and we'll talk about it again, because I have venues that the village of Homer Glen does, at unincorporated farm, that have more than 100 people come, and
It's included.
under
The village
500.
does it, it's not in this ordinance.
Right.
Well, this one says from 100 to 500, and I'm saying
But
it should
it
be
doesn't cover
500.
the village, the village is separate from this.
They do it in unincorporated.
But it's the village doing it.
Well, they're renting they're renting this farm from a private party.
Steve, where does it say 500?
It don't. It says
doesn't. It says
a
100.
capacity of 100 or more, and I'm saying it should be, if you have under 500, then you leave them alone. They don't need to worry about this policy. They're exempt.
David, do you have a comment?
Just real quick, is that when we've gone through this process over the past 5 years, the predominant issue that has been identified to us is the separation distance. It hasn't been necessarily the numerical number of individuals on premise. What caused the issue was the separation distance from the R zoning district. It just became, not even feasible to do what's required within the ordinance to notify all the property owners and get them to sign off and get it all recorded. It just, people would walk away. So really the main issue that we've experienced is not the number, it's the distance.
I think too, David, what about like out where I live, there's nobody zoned R. We're all zoned ag. And yet these rodeos, they really do, they're pretty detrimental. They can be detrimental. They're out there till all hours. They're drinking, driving crazy on the roads.
Well, I don't know if those are permitted or authorized or not, but if they were to come through the county under the process in the code, there are certain provisions in there we can deal with a lot of different issues. This is really the issues we've had are in more denser areas in Homer Township area. For example, on Gallup Road north of Route 6 on the west side. If they're in such close proximity to residential zoning, it would be very difficult for them to expand the use or to comply with these requirements.
Well, as I say, we'll be back to you multiple times prior to even asking you to consider something for adoption, and we can prepare an initial draft and continue to discuss this and other items. So let me give you a sense of some of the other items on our list. I think I've got this to work now. And most of the rest of these are just to give you a sense of issues that have been identified that are probably going to require a lot more thought on our behalf. But again, welcome your thoughts at this point in the process. The first one here is trucking-related uses. The existing ordinance, as we look back at it, lumps, to use a technical term, lumps kind of all trucking-related, warehouse, freight movement, truck parking, facilities together under one kind of umbrella term. And it's become clear as the county and the area continues to witness, expansion of its major freight movement, more intermodal operations, that we need a more refined approach to dealing with the various types of trucking-related uses that might want to locate within the unincorporated county. So that's what we believe our charge would be with regard to this issue. And the idea is to ensure that we're not regulating all trucking-related things in terms of the most intensive type of operation, but on the other hand, ensure that the most intensive type of operations, those that are most likely to generate impacts for nearby people, are adequately controlled, but to not impose a series of restrictions on those that may be more benign and just involve parking vehicles and things like that.
So I'm just going to go back for a second. For the entertainment and spectator sports, if they have some group, if it's 100 or more, are they required to have any kind of private security, or would they have to hire the sheriff's department? What do we do with something like that for safety reasons?
I'll have to look in the code to get the specific requirements, and I can follow up either after the meeting or I can get the end of the meeting. So.
Thank you.
I would like to answer that too, so.
I think that what they're talking about is a very important issue, because our township goes to a farm for stargazing, and they might get 30 people, but they might get 120 people. And you're talking about imposing a bunch of problems for them as far as permits or security. So I wouldn't want to see the township have to go out and get security for stargazing when they don't know how many people are even going to show up.
Well, also to keep in mind, when you see the entertainment and spectator sports, really what that's geared towards are events that are going to be regularly occurring on an annual basis or more than one time a year. When we do have events that are very specific in nature, where there might be some impact on the community, those are accommodated through a temporary use permit process.
And what about baseball tournaments?
We've never had any.
Well, that's entertainment, and they get thousands of people throughout the day. So we're going to tell them they have special rules. Baseball, football, soccer, that's all under sports entertainment.
Typically, those are covered under a particular zoning district where that use is authorized. If it's a C6 or a commercial district where you have ball fields, that would be authorized. But that particular use, I'm only aware of one unincorporated facility in Troy Township that has a baseball facility that perhaps has tournaments, and we've never had issues with that.
Homer Township has baseball tournaments, and unincorporated Homer Township, they have fields.
Is that a township facility?
They have a facility.
Maybe is there a school there? Is it a school facility or a park?
I would call it a park, but I don't know the exact term for it.
I would anticipate that that's already an authorized use on the property. So
I'm just worried about, there's plans to build more of those type of facilities, and they're going to end up probably going in unincorporated, and this is going to be determined. We're trying to do good things, but we got to be careful about limiting the numbers, and like you said, the miles. Everyone agrees a half mile, but when you say a certain number, there could be a lot of blowback from that.
But again, thus far, we've had zero issues with the uses you described.
We don't have these rules.
So, no, you do.
Yes.
Currently.
You've
Well,
had
then
these-
they're not enforcing them properly, thank God.
The facilities you're referring to may not be governed by these rules. And I think that's what David is saying, the certain are automatic permitted because of where they are and where they flow from. For instance, if they're municipal, your schools, those kinds of things are covered separately, so they are not a part of this and would not be affected.
I'm talking about
Would
unincorporated.
require- It's not the matter that they're unincorporated, it's that whose facility is it? For instance, even if it's not an unincorporated area, if it's a school who's doing it and it's already covered by another ordinance, then it wouldn't fall under this one.
We
That
have,
may be where
we
the
have farms,
confusion
we
is.
have like churches, we have township, and we will be having municipal too. So I mean, we're going to have a cross-section of all of them, right, in our district.
Well, I mean, if it might help, what I'd ask is that it would be really helpful if you want to put your thoughts in writing to us, and that we could take them into consideration as we move through this, take the concerns you're bringing us back.
Terrific. So we'll be, absent you telling us that we shouldn't be, we'll be working on the trucking-related aspects of the zoning ordinance to take a more nuanced and fine-grained approach and not simply treat anything involving a large truck the same way. Obviously, it makes some sense. We probably should have done that the first time. The next issue I'll broadly describe as one involving regulations that apply to accessory structures and accessory uses in residential zoning districts. The zoning ordinance today in residential districts establishes the customary zoning controls, the setbacks from the road, from the side property lines, the height of the main building. It also has regulations governing the size of, say, detached garages and sheds and outbuildings on maybe a larger residential property. There have been some citizen complaints that the size of the outbuildings in some cases and the activities that occurs within them sort of kind of tips it from something that doesn't seem very residential in character and nature. So on our punch list is the issue of taking a look at the size controls that now apply to accessory buildings. Many of the residential zoning districts allow accessory buildings up to 1,800 square feet in size. And you can imagine on a smaller residential lot, that's pretty sizable garage or pole barn or something that could be on that facility. So we thought it might be wise to sort of relook at those and see if we could come up with an approach that's a little more proportional. At the same time, we might want to take a re-look at what can occur within those outbuildings or accessory buildings on the property. Should somebody conducting a home business on their property take that business activity out to the garage or accessory building, or should it be confined to the principal dwelling itself? Communities take a different, some allow home occupations within accessory buildings, others don't. We'd welcome your input on those types of things. The other issue with regard to residential zoning is the parking of large commercial trucks on the property. And the way those regulations are in the ordinance today, they're a little bit difficult to enforce. So we're going to try and clarify those rules and make them easier for staff to deal with.
Maybe there should be a correlation between the size of the house and the outbuildings, maybe like 10% or something. I don't know. But 1,800 is certainly a large outbuilding. It could be the same size as a house. Sure.
So proportional to the size of the principal building, or maybe more proportional to the size of the lot, might be another way.
Right, a lot makes sense.
Any thoughts about whether one is appropriate for home business, home occupation type activities to occur in the building? Is that okay in most cases?
I would think,
Home occupation in the outbuilding?
Yes.
I would think that if somebody wants to operate a business out of their home, and it's not intrusive in a major way on the rest of the residents that they should be allowed.
I think there should be a limit of, like the employees coming, maybe one employee with maximum, instead of, several employees coming to a site. I think our current ordinance, I think, allows one employee in the house or something like that.
Well, there's, when you say one employee, it's usually, not always, but usually, it's the husband, wife, and children that run the business out of their garage or their basement. And they may have people coming throughout the day to pick up items, or they may have a lot of deliveries, and they take the deliveries and sort them out, and they bring them to the post office or UPS and ship them. So that's how they do their livelihood. You take that away from them, and now how do they pay their property taxes, which are excessive? How do they live?
I don't think there's...
So I don't see how we as a board can regulate what other people are doing in their house to earn a living, especially if that's their only source of income. Now, if they're going to be excessive, where you have a semi coming and making deliveries in a neighborhood block, that's a problem. But a UPS truck coming, and up by...
A noise factor is too.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying, semi maybe, but a UPS truck? Is there a problem if a UPS truck comes 4 times a day to deliver something in somebody's house, even if it's in an extremely residential area? I don't think so. Is there a problem if the husband, wife, and 2 kids are operating a business out of their garage?
I think you don't want to turn neighborhoods into industrial parks either.
Exactly.
No, I ain't saying that. I'm saying that...
But that has to be in...
There's people that want to have businesses and they want to use their home because they can't, they're a small business. They can't afford to go rent property because it's too expensive. So they do it out of their garage. So, I'm just trying to look at it broadly. I mean, if you went to each individual circumstance, that would be different. But in a broad sense, we should allow businesses to be operated out of their house. This is how America was founded, with small business. And why should we inhibit small business?
I would think maybe one panel truck, but not 2 or 3 2-ton trucks or half-ton trucks or whatever, the larger trucks. I don't think they should be coming frequently in and out of the residential neighborhoods. And have, writings on the side of the truck, this is their business. And
well, how does that hurt if a guy parks a van with the name of his company on the van in his driveway? So what?
I'm saying one truck, but not multiple trucks.
If you got 3, it won't fit in the, be too many for the driveway. They won't be able to get their cars in and out unless they use their vans for their own private use.
Well, they can put another driveway in if they want to.
They could do a lot of stuff. I mean,
It sounds
at the
like
point another
we need to
driveway,
be-
you're going to have to get a permit, and you're not going to get the permit.
Well, the one case that we did have was the person that had an electrical contractor. He put additional driveway in, and then, so he could put more trucks in
Right. I get that. I was saying in a broad sense, we got to be sure we're not going to put rules in there that are going to hurt small business. It's not about, specific this one. We make rules for everybody in the county. There's about 700,000 people in this county. We don't want to make rules for 10 people because 10 people aren't following what we think is a rule. They think it's okay. We think it's not. So we're the governing body, so we tell them you can't do it. That's 10. 10 people we might make a rule for it is bad. But when you're making a rule like this, we got to make sure that it's inclusive of, he's talking about broad rules. So why should we say you can't have a small business? Basically, unless you operate with so many trucks, again, when they have a small business, don't they have to get a permit from you guys? They have operate a business out of their garage?
No, under the home occupation portion of the ordinances, there are certain types of businesses that are expressly prohibited as home-based business. But then there's a definition of what constitutes a home-based business, and they don't have to receive a separate permit to do that. It's an allowed use in a residential zone if it is not one of those expressly prohibited types of businesses. I think really the issue that we're looking here is right now, the previous boards had recognized with the changing nature of the economy and the growth and the proliferation of home-based businesses, that perhaps we needed to have something in our ordinance that would accommodate the fact that there's a growing number of home-based businesses. So the current set of rules that we have pretty broad authorization for home-based businesses, with a relatively few exceptions of types of businesses that can't be under that category. The question that's arisen here is that, when you say the word home-based business, the usual connotation of that would be the home, the primary residence, that the nature of the business activity would be perhaps restricted to that primary residential structure. But the current law says, no, it's not restricted to that. You can utilize, under certain limits, the accessory structure, the garage, or whatever. Now, some people say, that's perfectly fine, that's comfortable, that feels good, that's all right, we're okay with that. We're just simply feeding back to you that over the course of time, and you'll recall certain incidents that came up, that there were circumstances where some residents, felt like, no, that's uncomfortable, that a home-based business actually can be dealt with in the accessory structure. That's broader than the notion we have of a home-based business. So we're obviously not going to decide today. What's just simply being teed up for you is that this is among the types of issues that we'll be working with you over the next several months to decide whether there's a need for any change to the existing home-based business. One of the kinds of changes that might occur is restricting use of accessory structures. But if in the final analysis, after your deliberations, you decide, nope, everything the way it's written right now is perfectly fine, then that's the way it'll stay.
And what, Kurt, assuming everything that you said is correct to what I'm hearing, because we hear different things than what the person says sometimes, but I would say, thank God we have good rules right now.
Reagan, you got a comment?
Kurt pretty much said what I was going to say. I think what the committee should consider is, obviously look at the existing ordinance as it's written, but we are dealing with two separate things. We're dealing with a home business and then an accessory business. Then the committee could consider, if you want to have, both or just one, and then what types of business, categorically, what types of business you feel is appropriate in a home, and what types of businesses you would feel is appropriate in accessory. I think, that, if you narrow it down to that, what issues you may have had in your district or, that have come before your committee, but if you kind of just narrow it down, you don't want to get into the weeds, Steve, but it's more or less home, accessory, and then categorically in each. So I'm sure there's other ordinances and out there, I think again, look at our ordinance and then how you guys would like that. If changed, look at it in those ways, if that helps.
And as we're thinking about this with the home occupations, in 2012, just a little bit of background, is the ordinance, the provisions were broadened to allow a little bit more to happen within the accessory structure. And what does that mean? Individuals were allowed to store materials and equipment which were associated with the home occupation. So, there could be conceivably, again, it's something for you to think about as we go through this, a lot of activity that is either within the building or outside the building and transferring the materials and equipment for the business. It could be loading and unloading of trucks. Whether or not you want to allow, for example, the continued storage, let's say, of a trailer within the building with a bobcat on it, or a little bit of equipment and not just materials. And again, Kurt was talking about it, and that bleeds into the issue of the parking of the vehicles that are associated with that business on the premises, how big they're going to be, and I think Kurt was probably going to talk about that a little bit. So there's a lot of things for you to think about, including not just with the size of the building, But perhaps, are there any zoning districts where, if it's a more dense zoning district, where you may not want to allow the accessory building to be used for the storage of equipment materials? Perhaps that's more in the more larger lots, more rural areas of the zoning district, E1, E2, things like that, or the R1s or the R2s. So there's a lot of issues here that popped up, and it's very difficult too. Is that the culture in Will County, is very diverse as far as what may be acceptable and may not be. What may be acceptable in this part of the county may not be over here, and it may be acceptable in less dense and not more dense. So there's a lot of different moving parts in this as we go forward, if you can think about it.
Okay. Go ahead, Kurt. Move on.
We'll move on. 2 words, solar farms. We've heard from the Farm Bureau and others that there's growing interest as the operators of these types of facilities are looking for sites. One of the things we're looking at is maybe untillable farmland or tillable farmland for that matter. And there actually have been inquiries, and I think we learned from the Farm Bureau that there's like 4 contracts for solar farm type operations. They may never materialize in terms of an actual facility, but they've got some sites that they could potentially come in the future. Right now, they'd come in as a special use, but there are really no regulations to provide sort of an objective guidance for things like setbacks and visual screening from roads or from nearby residences and that sort of thing, and how the staging of the construction activity and the like. So we're thinking that we'll come back to you with some proposed regulations that have been tested in other places where maybe the solar farm economy is a little further advanced, and jurisdictions, unincorporated counties have imposed reasonable controls to protect everybody's interest. And so that'll be one of the things that we'll be coming back to you to talk about.
Just when you go for a special use to get a solar farm, doesn't the person that's trying to put it in have to get special rules for where they're putting it already? And we have to agree to those rules? Or with a special use permit, we have to agree that we're going to allow it first, and then we tell them what they can and can't do. So what you're saying is, before they apply, we're going to tell them what they can and can't do, correct? So we have to, when you do that, I think we have to go with minimums and then expect to add on, because if you go to some place and you say you need a 30-foot high area, like some type of fencing that was 30 foot high to block the glare to the drivers on a road, that might be real good for some areas. In other areas, it may not be needed. You may only need 20 feet. Depends on if it's on a hill or it's in a valley. There's a lot of stuff. So we got to be careful about what type of rules we put, because again, this is for the whole county. So we don't want to be too restrictive.
Well, you can put conditions, any conditions.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. You go to special use, and then that's where it's all discussed.
Okay.
They come here all the time with special use stuff.
Just my own clarification, what we're doing right now is you just want to advise us of some categories that we're going to need to look at going forward as we update the ordinance, right?
Yes,
we're not solving anything right now.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Another issue, it's kind of minor, but I felt like it's important to talk to you about. Right now, if you're doing a natural gas or some kind of utility, there are lots of things that are exempt from zoning under federal and state law, utility, transmission type lines. But then there are some pipelines that aren't exempt from zoning. They may be transporting oil or some other types of facility. By and large, those facilities are underground, but occasionally they need to come out of the ground. And right now, people have to get all sorts of variances because maybe they only need a small parcel for a regulating station or some kind of odorization equipment. And it seems particularly burdensome for the property owner, for the pipeline operator, and for staff and others. So we'd like to maybe carve out some exemptions from lot area and lot width requirements for these types of facilities, just to facilitate. These facilities are pretty strictly regulated under federal law anyway, so we're not talking about really safety concerns. We need to be mindful of their impacts on farmers and agricultural fields and field tiles, but that's really not what we're getting into. We just want to have some zoning guidance for making it easier for these types of facilities.
So I know like we have a ton of pipelines go through our area in eastern Will County, and I know there were various different problems that occurred. So could we look at putting some, I know Mark from the farm is very knowledgeable, and Bob Jakowski, who worked as a consultant, to put more meat into this for them to have to comply with certain things, because there were some problems that happened, and it took a long time to resolve some of them, or there was an issue where, because of weather and everything, it went way beyond the expected end date.
Mm-hmm.
So would we be looking at some of that stuff?
That certainly is a possibility, and we welcome that sort of input. We've, of course, talked to Mark on a couple of occasions, and I think he did mention that long construction cycle that was problematic in that one instance. But so we are talking to him. If you've got specifics that you want us to look at, might as well do it as part of this particular effort. So the next thing on the list, when we did the ordinance in 2012, craft brewing was getting a lot of traction, and we did, I think, a pretty good job of putting craft brewing and craft distilling operations in the ordinance, and reasonable treatment, pretty generous allowance for where those types of facilities occur, but we left out wineries, and there's growing interest throughout Illinois in wineries. So this is just a heads up that we'll probably be adding a specific reference to where wineries can locate. That's kind of a good segue into this next one, and that is maybe non-traditional activities on active farms. Agritourism uses is the term that's often used. And that can range from things that are quite customary in Will County historically, like pumpkin farms, where we always used to go from the city to Will County and places for things like that. But there's a kind of range of uses that fall within the agritourism thing, and sometimes wineries are lumped in there. So we may be coming back to you to suggest some loosening of the range and reasonable allowances for things that can occur on rural and agricultural lands that don't have significant impacts on neighbors.
Kurt,
Yes, Kurt.
don't want to bog down here. People seem to be getting this one and understanding it. But this is, again, the whole process of these zoning changes over time is, new technologies emerge or old ones come back into fashion. And enthusiasm for locally grown food and so on and so forth is relatively new, it's never went away, but a new emergent interest in this topic. But, there was a period of time where our zoning ordinances were intentionally restricting farm stands and things of that nature. But now, listening to the community, there's this indication that maybe we'd like to re-accommodate those kinds of facilities because of the growing public interest in locally grown food. So that's really kind of what's behind a lot of this.
That's it. That's right. Here's one that I know you've discussed before in different contexts. There's a provision in the ordinance now for what's it called, eco housing? I bet you do.
Now, nobody break down knives.
We're not proposing any changes to those provisions. I think you've done a good job of dealing with that. But there has been some interest and inquiries about, could the ordinance possibly be amended at some point in the future in certain zoning districts to accommodate other forms of accessory dwelling units on the same property? Say the property is zoned in, it's basically a single family zoning district. Are there ways that we could maybe partition off part of our house, put a separate kitchen and bathroom facilities in there, and then have it, available for to help us with our mortgage or something like that? So In zoning parlance, these are generally lumped under the term accessory dwelling units. Sometimes they're interior conversions of space within the principal building, and sometimes it's maybe a small cottage in the backyard, or space above the garage where a small accessory dwelling unit is made for maybe the son or daughter returns home from college and they're going to spend a year or two there where they're getting on their feet, paying off their student loans and all that stuff. So those are the issues that drive people's community's consideration of whether or not they should accommodate that. And I guess the question we have before you, is this a road that we should go down? Is this fertile ground to be pursued, or are we pretty happy with keeping our single-family districts largely devoid of secondary dwelling units on the property?
I'd like to talk about it.
What would you like to say?
He said, yes, put that on the agenda
Yeah.
to discuss, not to discuss it here.
Okay. You want us to run some trial provisions by you and see if that makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
And also whether they could be used for like rentals or something like that.
Yeah, that's often the question.
Or vacation homes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that there may be some kind of crossover into that agritourism thing, as people maybe want to live on the experience what it's like to live on a farm for the weekend.
It might help pay property taxes. If you're a senior, you can't afford them anymore, maybe you could do something like that and maybe stay where you grew up at.
I know that with the opening of Balmoral, with this new HITS program that they have out there, like all the local hotels were full. And these horse jumping shows go for about 2 weeks at a time. And I've heard from friends who are interested in doing Airbnb in their homes, simply like that, to accommodate these people who are coming in and staying in our area for about two weeks at a time. So this is definitely a good idea to add.
All right.
And it's a short term, I mean, they're not going to be there year round, but yes, there's a lot of people in our area that are interested in doing that. And I think they should be nobody to do it.
Right.
So.
Okay. Are you nearing the end? The existing zoning ordinance has a landscape chapter. That landscape chapter has some pretty specific lists of allowed trees and vegetation that can be used to meet the landscape requirements. And by and large, that works, but there have been instances where people have criticized those lists as being too inflexible, not allowing enough diversity, other plant materials that may be appropriate for planting in Will County. So we'd like to loosen those lists up and come back to you with some proposals in that direction.
So if I might say, so my idea was, since we do have a burning issue in the county, I thought that I would propose that we would only allow trees that do not drop their leaves.
I'll vote for that.
Sorry, that was a bad
That would
segue.
become part of nature, come on.
I couldn't resist that.
Judy is very good.
Here's one you might have heard about. I think this is an inadvertent issue, and it may be, I could have classified it as a Scribner's error, but because I think maybe a couple of people got an email about it, I want to tell you we're on top of it. When there are fence regulations in the existing ordinance, and by and large those will work fine, nobody's got any complaints, but inadvertently it prohibits the use of any kind of electrified fencing strands, like for the top and the bottom of the fence, in the E districts, which allow the keeping of livestock. And with the growing predator population, there's a concern that you really can't keep some forms of livestock if you don't keep predators out of the field, and one of the best ways to do it, for a lot of people anyway, is to use the electrified fencing. So we're going to fix that in the existing ordinance. And the final issue that I wanted to bring to your attention is there continues to be people who come in with older legal lots that they don't meet the minimum size requirements in the zoning ordinance. And we really endeavored as part of the 2012 effort to make that process easier and to clarify the rights of legal non-conforming lots. But we think we've got even an easier way to deal with that, and that's basically to say, one idea under consideration that we'll come back to is to say, if you had a legally created lot prior to 2012, you're good to go.
That's good.
But that's probably not the way we'll write it, but that's kind of the concept we'll come back to. So that's a sense of kind of the bigger picture things that we're working on. If you want to add anything to the list or wish us good luck, we'll be seeing you soon.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Looking forward to seeing the detail later on.
Good. We'll be feeding you information as it becomes available, and look for significant drafts later this summer.
If people have other items that they'd like to add to the list, would you like to see an email from them to David?
You can report to me and we'll call both of us actually. So.
Thank you.
That's a good
For
point.
variations
Yeah.
on this list, send it to David.
Well, there is an existing list which is much larger. You might want to check and make sure it's not already on there.
Good idea.
Never hurts to hear a duplicate. I mean, and please tell your neighbors and friends and interest groups who maybe didn't see their name on the list, make sure they know about this project and have them reach out if they've got things they wish we could address from a zoning standpoint.
Just slight clarification on that point. Sometimes I think about this as, the python swallowing the elephant. When we were doing the total rewrite of the ordinance, that really was an elephant. This time, for the reasons we've all discussed before, this is a cleanup, fix-up type of thing. So it's only an antelope, okay? It's not as big as an elephant, but we've sort of defined for a working definition of the boundaries of that antelope, and that's on a list that if you haven't received it, we're going to send it out again to you so you can see that, and that's a working document. As we go forward with this process, some of those items that we're wrestling with right now may fall off because it proves untenable to address them for one reason or another, or you may suggest another thing that, let's have taller ears on the antelope. We may add various things. But just so everybody is kind of aware of what's the parameters of what we're taking a look at right now, we'll send you a list that spells it all out.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to reports. I have no reports. Committee members, any comments or anything? Okay. Director, any comments?
Just wanted to make one observation. First of all, thank you to the committee very much for the very constructive feedback and guidance that you've provided to staff and to the consultant as we move forward with the process. I'm sure it'll be very beneficial. But we've encouraged you and would continue to encourage you to get the word out to your constituency about this process. But here's one thing sort of a cautionary note I want to share with you, is that, whenever you go through a process like this, life goes on while we're looking at making changes. Life goes on. And occasionally a person will not be in compliance with the existing ordinance, okay? And so our code enforcement people come into them and say, hey, you got a problem, you're going to have to fix it. Well, it's possible that they may be in touch with their county board member, and the county board member, well-intended, might say, well, that thing that you've run into here doesn't seem to make sense to me. Perhaps we can change that. We are doing a zoning updating. Maybe we can change the law, and that'll get you off the hook. I guess what I'm just stating to you is that until the law is changed, until it's actually passed by a majority of the board and signed by the county executive, the law as it's currently written is the rule book. So I guess it's just kind of uncomfortable when somebody says, oh, I know you're telling me I have to correct that situation, but my county board member told me that it's under consideration to be changed, so I guess I don't have to do it because you're going to change it pretty soon in the future. Obviously, that's not correct. I guess I'm just bringing it to you for your cooperation, that as we educate the populace about what we're doing here, that we don't unintentionally give them the impression that okay, because we might change something in the future, you don't have to play by the rules now.
I'm sure we would do that.
Anymore.
Okay, any public comment? No public comment? Got a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Motion second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Adjourn, thank you.